Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to the channel, and if I did my research right, I believe that around this time was when the Yu-Gi-Oh manga was first released. I probably should have done my research before I clicked record, but I just didn't. But anyway, in honor of Yu-Gi-Oh, the manga at least, starting around this time, I decided to do a video where I go through my answers on this 30-day Yu-Gi-Oh challenge. I do have to say that I can't take full credit for this. My brother showed me this, and while it's not necessarily up to date, since it doesn't include Link monsters, and obviously Rush is nowhere in America, so that wouldn't be included either, it still covers a wide variety of topics, both from the card game itself and from the anime series. So, while I initially planned on having 30 separate videos answering each one of these, I just thought it would be easier to just answer each one right here in this video. Now, I'll keep this up for the whole video, so if you want to answer each one of these as well, you can feel free to. The only thing is, first of all, I'm going to keep to having a variety of answers. For example, I'm going to try my best to avoid decks that use a lot of summoning mechanics. Take Yuya's pendulum monsters from the anime. I'm not going to have one of his monsters from an archetype be included for pendulum, fusion, heck, even synchro, and all the other mechanics from Arc 5 as well. I'm going to try and branch out and make it a variety of answers just to make the video more interesting. And also, I'm going to be saving my favorite card till the end of this, so I'll be starting with most favorite character first. So, with that, let's begin, and my favorite character, I don't think this has changed since I did my top 10 favorite Yu-Gi-Oh characters from before. It's still Jack Atlas. I really like Jack. The dub honestly kind of helps with it because that's what I grew up with. But I just like Jack's deck, even though the Resonators aren't necessarily needing to be part of the Red Dragon Archfiend deck. I still consider them the same, and I do think that Jack is probably my favorite signer of all of them. But I just like Jack's attitude, and while he did get kind of flanderized in the second half of 5Ds, I do still like him as a character. Now, for my least favorite character, I knew which series it was going to be from the start. The only question is, which one would it be? And my decision is Catherine from Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. I knew all along it was going to be one of Yuma's friends because none of them did anything in the show. But as far as all of them goes, Bronk is the best friend, and he at least does a little bit more compared to some of his other friends. Tori, she's the main girl. I can't really justify putting her up here. And between Caswell and Flip, while they are kind of on the insignificant side, at least I can say more positives from them rather than Kathy. The only real reason that Kathy is in the show is to create a love triangle with Tori, which doesn't really appeal to me. But the next prompt is, which anime arc would I like to live in? So from Domino City in the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, all the way up to, what do they call it in range? Den City, I think it is. I don't know if it's changed in the dub. But my answer is Duel Academy. It has to be Duel Academy. A school where you learn how to duel is too appealing of an answer for me not to give it. And the follow-up question to this, which deck archetype would I play there? So this is where things get interesting, because since I'm taking into consideration GX era, the most they had at that point were fusion monsters, so I excluded any decks involving synchros, Xyz, pendulums, even links. So I thought a lot of good fusion decks were used in the show, like the Destiny Heroes, Elemental Heroes, Viacroids, all these fusion decks, but there are a select few that weren't included, mainly because they weren't around. And the one I'm going to play is the Frightverse. I just really like the deck. I like how the main deck monsters are more or less more cutesy, and then the fusion monsters are super menacing. I just love that contrast, and Sora's turn in Arc 5 is honestly a highlight for the show for me, mainly because it's in the first part of the show. But while I would have liked to pick a deck like the Ancient Gears, for example, I can't really justify putting them in here instead, since Dr. Crowler is going to be using them. But the next group of questions are my favorite characters from the original series, GX, 5Ds, Zexal, and Arc 5. So going through my favorite from the original, it's Joey Wheeler. I don't think, I mean, besides Little Yugi, I can't really well, maybe Kaiba. But like, I just like Joey's growth in the show. The fact that he started off as an inexperienced duelist and gradually honed his skills, got better cards. Just a really good motivational story. Not to mention, Joey's just become a meme in any facet of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now from GX, didn't do this on purpose, swear, another Wayne Grayson role, Cyrus Truesdale. Realistically, the only other one that I probably could have put is maybe Jaden. I could argue Aster as well. But I wanted to try and steer clear of including protagonists because they have their own special set of plot armor included in this. And just like Joey, I like Cyrus's growth as a duelist throughout the show. And from 5Ds, I'm not going to build it up. It's Jack Atlas. Same as my favorite character. Not that big of a surprise. Favorite from Zexal is actually Shark. Reginald Castle is really a good character. I don't really want to give much away because I don't know if anybody that's watching this has seen all of Zexal. Although I did kind of already spoil Sora, but you know, whatever. But I just like Shark as a character. He just comes off as a character that is the epitome of the rule of cool. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense, but just Shark comes off as cool and confident that anything he does doesn't really matter to me, for lack of a better way to explain it. Plus the fact that, in essence, he's a rival, but he uses a water deck, which really didn't get much representation from the early parts of the show up to this point. Plus, again, I'll say, his turn in the later half of Zexal was really well done in my opinion. And favorite from Arc 5 is Gong Strong. There are a lot of characters that I could have put. I was really thinking about putting Serena on here, but Gong is just a funny character. He comes off as a character that is very stoic and serious at times, but also goofy. And does it help that he speaks to himself in the third person in the dub? Maybe. It also helps that his deck is focused on defense, but they attack in defense mode. It's just a really unique concept. And I guess for a bonus for anybody that actually cares, my favorite from Reigns is probably going to be Revolver. Realistically, there are very few characters in that show that did a lot, so it was really a hard choice to pick, but it's not really part of the prompt. I just wanted to include it anyway. Now we're moving on to least favorite card. This is going to show my age as a Yugi boomer. My least favorite is probably Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Either that or like Infinite Impermanence, any of these newfangled hand traps that just make it so your opponent can't play the game. Even Nibiru to an extent. It's just all of these Fox Girl spirit things that activate in the hand. It's one of those things that comes off as a bit uncreative. Now, I came from an era where everybody used Monster Reborn and Pot of Greed, so I know that I don't really have a leg to stand on. But with stuff like this, it's just like negates an effect, negates a summon, negates all of this stuff, and it just comes off as unfun in my opinion. And least favorite deck archetype, there's probably a lot I could pick. I was thinking about picking Kashtira, but it's the For Hires. And it's really only because I did a PvP duel in Duel Links a while ago, and then my opponent just went wild with the For Hire deck and just immediately destroyed me. And I didn't know anything about the deck. It's just one of those things where I'm sure they have these effects where unable to be destroyed by card effects, targeted by card effects, negating your opponent's effects, all this stuff. And I know that that's probably how the meta of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is right now, but it just comes off as not very fun to me. But next we're going through my favorites of each type, besides Link's. First up is my favorite normal or vanilla monster. There are a lot of good choices, especially from early Yu-Gi-Oh! But I decided to go with Gem Knight Garnet. I just like the Gem Knights and the fact that there are some that are Geminis, there are some like Garnet that realistically can be put in any deck since he's a 1900 beater. There are a lot of other good ones as well. Voice Raider is a very cool monster as well. But I just like the fire on Garnet and the fact that it's based off of gems. And I think I found the deck when I was watching Steven Universe, which doesn't necessarily hurt. Favorite spell card? There are a lot of spell cards in the game. But the one I'm picking right now is Special Hurricane. It's not really, although honestly, to be fair, it is kind of a good card in today's meta because everything is special summoning. But I just like it for the artwork. The artwork just looks really cool, and that's the only reason that I included it. Favorite effect monster is actually going to be Revolution Synchron. I already like Power Tool Dragon, so the fact that they gave him a miniature version is really cool to me. Although I wish that it wouldn't be so expensive so I could actually put it in my Morphtronic deck. But who knows, maybe the price has gone down since I checked. I just like this monster, and I'm sure that you've noticed that I tend to lean towards machine sort of vibes like Revolution Synchron here. I already mentioned the Ancient Gears, Super Heavy Samurais. So that may or may not be foreshadowing from the rest of the list. Favorite fusion monster? So, believe it or not, after my big speech, it actually isn't a machine monster. It's Infernoid Tiara. And I didn't even know that this card existed until I started searching it up. But I found this monster and I just thought that it looked really cool. That's really it. I don't know anything about the Infernoid deck. I don't know how it plays. I just like the design. Favorite trap card? Again, probably like Special Hurricane, where it's not really a good card. It's Frozen Soul. I just remember getting this card from a pack, whatever pack it came out in, and I just thought that it looked really cool. To be honest, I don't know what it really does or if there's any situation where you can make the card work, but considering it's a common card, it's probably not that impressive, but again, just for the artwork. Now we're moving on to the other summoning mechanics with favorite synchro monster. So, maybe hard to believe, I didn't actually pick a Signer Dragon for this. I picked the opposite end. Thought Ruler Archfiend. I just really like this monster and it looks really threatening and menacing. And I didn't really want to make it super obvious and pick one of the signers. Although there are a lot of synchro monsters that I could have picked. I just always like this monster and it looks really cool. The fact that it can increase your life points when most early psychic monsters decrease your life points instead is really cool. Favorite Xyz monster? Kind of the same vibe as a lot of the other things I've mentioned so far. Heroic Champion Excalibur. A deck that I built when I was back in high school or early college. I just really like the heroic deck. Warrior sort of vibe. Looking like machines. I like that this monster can realistically get to probably 8,000 attack if you play your cards right. With like 2 overlay regain, get them on his material, and double the attack points. A really cool, what's the term, FTK monster? Although you can't really attack on the first turn, but you know what I mean. He can go up to 4,000 attack and even 8,000. It's just a really cool monster. Easily my favorite of the deck. Now my favorite pendulum monster. So, like Infernoid Tiara, it's a more recent pick, but it is, what's it called? Dos Sulfur Coolea, I think it's called? Let me see, I wrote it down here. Yeah, Dos Sulfur Coolea. So, I went shopping with my brother a few weeks back, and they had, what pack did this come out in? I can't remember. But, I saw this card, and the pack itself was like $3 because it was discounted, probably because it's an old pack. I noticed that this card was on the cover, and I pulled the card. I didn't know anything about the deck. Turns out it's a music-based deck with pendulums, so it looks pretty cool. I'm going to try and build it. But just the fact that I pulled one of the cover cards on it, and the fact that it's pink hair reminds me of a lot of anime characters that I'm a huge fan of. Just a really cool deck and a really cool monster, and that's why I picked it. Now we're going on to the more wacky sort of questions. So the first two back to back are who of the female characters should be my friend, and then the male characters afterwards. So there are a lot that I could have picked, and I didn't want it to be, well, I'll go through my female pick first. My female pick is going to be Taya, mainly because Taya just comes off as a ray of sunshine, a ray of positivity, and anybody will be lucky to have her as a friend. And I realize the joke about Taya and friendship, yeah, you know. But Taya just genuinely comes off as a good person that very rarely sees the bad in people, from what I can remember from the early Yu-Gi-Oh! And the fact that she has some snark, especially in the dub, doesn't hurt either. Then for the male characters, I don't know if this is going to be an unpopular pick. I'm sure that it's going to be Silvio Sawatari from Arc 5. So, I picked Taya for my idea of positivity and stuff like that. I picked Silvio because he's just a troll. He comes off as super boastful and super over the top, and there's a part of me that admires him for that. I just wish that his dueling skills could back it up, but unfortunately it doesn't. Like I wanted to say earlier, I didn't want it to just be picking Jack Atlas or Joey Wheeler or Cyrus because they're my favorite characters from each show. I wanted it to be something that's more variety. And while I could see myself being friends with Joey or even Cyrus, I wanted to go with a bit of a wacky pick. Then for my favorite villain is Maximilian Pegasus. I was really close to picking Merrick, but in my opinion, what sets someone like Pegasus apart from Merrick is Pegasus is, like Silvio, just a troll. He doesn't really come off as super threatening until you cross him in the wrong way. And while I do really like Merrick for just being unhinged and over the top, there's just something charming about Pegasus. And the dub, and even the sub from what I've heard from Pegasus, doesn't hurt because his performance in both is just spectacular. Now, my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh game, keep in mind I am not including Duel Links in this. I haven't played a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh games, but going back to what I mentioned earlier, I picked Duel Academy. And I think that's probably what made me want to live at Duel Academy in the first place. Although I do really like the Sacred cards as well. And even a lot of the games from the 5Ds era I haven't had a chance to actually play. So this question's a little bit unfair that I didn't get a chance to play all of the games. But I don't think that it would have made a difference. Because Duel Academy, the game, just has a lot of reaction faces from the characters that are just really funny and memeable to me. And my favorite starter or structure deck, I've mentioned them a couple of times. It's the Machine Revolt structure deck. The deck that made me decide to build an Ancient Gear deck. Gadgetron's a really cool monster. I think you get Ancient Gear Golem in this as well. Actually, no, I don't think you do. Because I think this deck is more based around the gadget monsters. Because you get Gadgetron Dragon, Gadgetron Chimera. I don't think you get a lot of gear support. You might get Gear Town in here, which is a real cool spell card as well that I didn't even get to bring up. But yeah, just for the simple fact that this was my gateway into building my Ancient Gear deck into the powerhouse that it is, certainly doesn't hurt. First card that I remember, there are a lot of cards that I do remember. I could even say something like Blue Eyes because of the anime, but my pick is Urabi. A very insignificant, by back then standards and even now, weak monster from the early set, but I just remember pulling this guy from a pack, and he just looks really cool. And you know, little kid, dinosaurs, gotta love him. The next one is a card that reminds you of a friend. So, I have a story for this. Hanewada. So, what I did back in high school, because I had a bunch of different decks that I was building at the time, like my Ancient Gears and a bunch of other ones. But what I did, I just put a bunch of monsters together in a synchro-based deck, and said this one would remind me of this friend, this one would remind me of this friend, and the main deck and the extra deck would all be that. In hindsight, saying it out loud does come off as kind of cringe, but I'm sure I just wanted it to be like that after watching Yusei use monsters like Hanewada and Eccentric Boy in the anime, and this is the one I remember. I know a lot of the other ones were Ancient Fairy Dragon, Power Tool Dragon, just a bunch of random people that I knew in high school that I don't really talk to now. Didn't mean for this to come off as morbid, but it just did. My most valuable card. So, I forgot that I wanted to have two sections for this. One for money-wise, and one for what I think is the most valuable. I don't really remember what I had planned for the other one, but most valuable money-wise, I did pull an IP Masquerena. I don't remember what package from. I think it's a secret rare, so if anybody actually knows where that's from, I could check, but I don't want to. But I do have that. I do have a Mystic Mine. I know, don't shoot me, Yu-Gi-Oh players. I'm not planning on putting it in any of my decks. But as far as most valuable outside of that, as far as to me, it's probably an Ancient Gear Golem secret rare that I got from the GX Speed Duel box. Or maybe a friend of mine got it and I traded it with him. Something like that. It's not really a good answer, but it's a secret rare Ancient Gear Golem. It reminds me of the Lost Millennium where it came out in secret rare as well. So I think that's my backup answer. A booster set I'd love to have every card of. So there are a lot of answers that I could have picked. I was really thinking about early Yu-Gi-Oh! Legend of Blue Eyes Metal Raiders, but I went with Power of the Elements. It gives you the new Neospatian support, it gives you the new Morphtronics, it even comes out with the new Melfies, which I love the Melfies, and I'm upset that I wasn't able to include them anywhere. But just a really good pack overall. Although at the same time, I probably do have almost every card from this pack outside of their rarer cards. I would assume that the question's more geared towards just having a binder where you have all the cards just as a display piece or something. Realistically, the answer probably is an early set of Yu-Gi-Oh! For me, but I wanted to include something from the Melfies. And my best memory of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! With a friend, so Stratos is on the screen. The story is, I need to get my note out for this one because it's a bit of a long story from what I remember. So, my brother was in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Group in high school. We had an hour lunch. We could go wherever we wanted. If we needed help with classes, we could go there. We had lockers, and we dueled on top of the lockers. And I dueled against one of my brother's friends who was a senior at the time. I don't remember what I was even playing with. Probably just a scrap deck because it was just, well, not a literal scrap archetype deck, like a terrible deck. Because I just remember I opened with a terrible hand. I don't remember what I had, but I think my opponent must have been playing a hero deck because I know that they had Stratos and they just kept attacking me directly. But somehow I managed to turn the duel around by using Dark Hole and then using Monster Reborn to take my opponent's Stratos and keep attacking with that. And I think that's how the duel went. To be honest, my memory is a bit fuzzy because I would assume my opponent may not have been taking the duel seriously as well because I am still new. But that's how I remember it. I may have still lost. I would be surprised if I won that duel just from that, but who knows. That's how I remember it at least. And finally, going back to the very beginning, my favorite card, if you have been paying attention at any time in this video, you may be able to figure it out. My favorite card is Ancient Gear Gadgetron Dragon. I just really love this card to the point where I have 3 of them in my Ancient Gear deck. It's just super easy because I have Gear Town on the field. I can summon him with only 1 sacrifice, first of all. But also, if Gear Town gets blown up, I can play him. I can't play Ancient Gear Golem because he can't be special summoned. But it just gets to the point where I feel like Gadgetron becomes the head of my Ancient Gear deck more than Ancient Gear Golem, which is actually really cool to me. And, of course, dragons. Who doesn't love a dragon? But those are all 30 of my answers for the Yu-Gi-Oh! 30-Day Challenge. Didn't mean for it to go for almost 30 minutes, but I'll try and cut pieces out so it's not super long. And I do want to mention that there are probably going to be a lot of these answers that I change later. For now, my favorite Xyz monster is Excalibur, but later down the line, I might find out that I like number 39 Utopia more. These are the answers that I have right at this moment, and I would love to know yours. It's a really cool video, and just any reason for me to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is great for me because I don't get to do it a lot. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe so you don't miss any other potential Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos that I might post. I'll see you next time. Momentai.